Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast, make sure you like content like this. If you like content like this, make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Ileana. Ileana is here today to tell a journey of compassion, comparison, and disconnected power. Her journey has led her all over the world through studies of spirituality, metaphysics, unseen realms, and new age ideas. We will be touching on religion, disempowering beliefs, and her love for transforming lives. I am so excited for this podcast. Hello, lady. How are you?
I'm so good. Thanks, Sabrina, for having me. It's pretty exciting to be here. I've been watching your stuff and it's like, wow, so amazing.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you taking some time out of your day to hang out with me. I was just on your awesome podcast.
Yes.
Do you want to do a little drop there? What's the name of your podcast? It's up there, right?
Sure.
What is it? It's Phoenix on the Rise, right?
Phoenix on the Rise, yeah.
Yep. Can we find it at that website right there?
Yeah, and it's under Conversations. There's a tab called Conversations, and that's where I do all of my interviews with the ladies.
Beautiful. Yeah. So check that out. Go to her website. My podcast is up there, right? Is it already up there? Yep. Yes. So check that out and all of the awesome, wonderful stories of the individuals that are in her community and all the wonderful goodness that they're sharing over there. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to jump into your story. You're looking beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I would love to kind of just start out opening the floor to you and giving you an opportunity to kind of give us some background story of who you are and where you're from, a little bit about what you've been through, and then we'll kind of jump in to some questions. Is that cool?
Sure.
Awesome.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, my story. So I was born in Eastern Europe in a country called Romania back in the day when it was still a communist country. And my parents left the country and we lived in many different places. We eventually emigrated to Canada, where I did spend most of my life. And then I ended up coming back to Europe. So right now I'm living in Malta, country number 12, and planning country number 13 is next on the list. And that's coming along, those plans to leave once again and take another leap of faith.
Yes. Where? Do you know where?
France.
France. Have you been to France yet?
I've been to Paris and I've been to Strasbourg. And I'm planning a trip middle of July to, scope things out. But I've already made arrangements to move. It's time to leave and go back to the mainland and just open up those opportunities.
I love that. So what else? Tell us more.
So I was married quite young and it was a difficult marriage. And I finally had to leave because during that time I completely lost myself in every single way. Well, the truth was I never had found myself yet. So, I went from kind of like my parents' house to being married and not knowing who I was and expecting my partner to make my life happy. Because that was his job, right? That was his job. And, of course, he didn't make it. So I ended up leaving. But that was what propelled me onto my own journey of awakening and discovering that, no, it's not his job. It's actually my job. And there's a lot of layers of things that needed to be sorted through and dealt with. Not playing the victim, waking up to my own power. and starting my first business 20 years ago and the journey that took me through, and then just moving on from there. So lots of learnings, lots of growth. And my path was not straightforward at all. It kind of went all over the place, and it still does. But I trust a lot in inner guidance and lots of synchronicities that happen on a regular basis. So this is why I jump off the cliff a lot, because I always somehow land. Somehow it happens. And the more I learn, the more I grow as a person, the more I can share it with others and help others. So one of the reasons I do these interviews with courageous women is because I want to show that there is another way possible. And that just because you were born a certain way, you were raised a certain way, you don't have to define yourself that way. There are always opportunities and possibilities. And that's what I find very exciting about life.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is one of the things once personal development, at least for myself, came to a thing, it does become easier, like you said, to kind of like jump off.
Yeah, and hope the parachute opens.
Yeah.
So far it has. Sometimes
Yes.
in unexpected ways. Sometimes you have a particular plan and life says, well, yeah, but I actually have a better thing for you. And then something else occurs, which if you're open to it, turns out even better than you had ever thought.
Definitely. Hey,
So
how old were you when you were married?
I got married at 23.
Wow.
And then the marriage was really done by 32.
Wow.
And I've been on my own since. And that's, part of that was choice. And part of that was because I wanted to make sure that the next time I ever got seriously involved with someone, it was from a place of partnership and equality, and not expecting someone to take care of me in any way, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's my job. So it's taken me a long time to come to this place of realization that that's what I need to do. And now I'm in a very happy place. I'm thrilled with my life, and who knows what's going to happen next. Next adventures coming up.
What would you say to individuals who are getting married super young? Like when I was growing up, like women were getting married at like 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, that's very young. And the thing is that most people still grow. That's still a growth stage, right? I mean, you're still growing into your late 20s and transforming and changing. So for some people it works. I would say if you grow together, that's great. But often what I've seen is that people don't grow together and they start to grow apart. And one of the reasons I think that happens is because most people don't really know what they want.
Yeah.
And they also have unspoken expectations and assumptions about what marriage is supposed to be. And sometimes those assumptions are very different, and those are never discussed because they're very subconscious things. And that was definitely the case for my ex and I.
Yes, yes. And now people are being raised differently. Like boys are getting raised more emotionally because they're getting raised by their mothers.
Yeah.
So the whole generation of what that looks like as far as what a man is supposed to do is becoming a little different.
I think it's very confusing for some men. They're not really sure how to act.
I agree. Yeah.
Especially
100%.
as women become more empowered, they don't quite know where to fit in. They don't know how to speak to women. Do I open a door for her, or is she going to take that as an affront?
Yeah.
And even with women, my personal perception about that is, yes, of course I can open my own door, but it's kind of nice when somebody else does it. And sometimes I do it for someone else. Yes. It's not such a big deal to me, but I know that for some, it's become a thing. So, balance, just be balanced and, no extremism. That's just how I look at things, right?
Meet people where they're at.
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you think's been the biggest challenge you've gone through in your life?
Well, I think it was the fact that I had these expectations that it was my partner's job to make my life happy. And so that was the thing that I operated under without realizing. And so waking up from that, and it was ironically the breakdown of my marriage that made me realize that this is not going to work. And really, I'm disempowering myself by asking someone else to do that for me. And it's not fair. So that propelled me on a journey of total awakening. I did a lot of inner work. I did a lot of shadow work, inner child work. and also taking responsibility for my life, realizing that it is my job to take care of me. And I also started to study non-religious spirituality. That was a huge piece of my life, and it's like a 35-year long study, and it still continues to this day. There is so much beautiful information out there that I wasn't aware of before. So that's really helped me in my journey.
What is, I don't even know what that is. What is it? What did you just say? Non-religion spirituality?
Non-religious spirituality.
Yeah,
So,
tell us about that.
okay, so my basic belief is that we are spirit beings having a human experience.
Spirit
And
beings having a
human
human experience.
which
Okay.
means that we're much more than this body, this mind, this outer being. We are actually beings of light, which incarnate here and in other places to have particular experiences. So our true essence is energy. It's not matter, it's energy. So energy can take many forms. So reincarnation is a huge belief for me, and that we reincarnate in every life to learn certain lessons and to accomplish certain things. We have a soul contract that we have come here to fulfill, and there are people who incarnate with us to help us do that. So it's just this beautiful journey that really never ends. And this life is just kind of like a drop in the bucket of that eternal existence.
Do you believe that it's only here on Earth that this
No,
reincarnation's happening?
no,
Really?
no. I've read so many books and so much channeled material, and there are a number of hypnotherapists who have regressed people to other lives that they've lived on different planets and different worlds. Have you heard of Dolores Cannon?
No.
Yeah, so Dolores Cannon was a hypnotherapist who worked in those places, and she was a prolific writer. She's passed away now. She wrote a number of books about her experiences with different people that she regressed, who reported on different lives, and not all of them on this planet or on this dimension, and it's, you know, in the future, in the past, and it's an incredible vista to see, and it just helps you pull out of your human persona and adopt a very different view about your life on earth. At least it did for me.
Why do you think it's not mainstream? Why do you think this is not something that more people know about?
Because we are very conditioned to and programmed to behave in a certain way, so that we don't awaken to this ultimate reality of ourselves. Because if we were to awaken to that, we would probably decide to live very differently than we live right now. Because right now we are told how to behave, how to dress, how to think. We are actually told how to do everything. What is normal, what clothes to wear, what makeup to wear if you're women, how to wear your hair, what to do after 50 and what not to do. This is
What
constant,
conditioned
constant.
us?
Many different things. So it starts in childhood, right? First of all, as soon as you're born, pink or blue, right? Right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Starts, right? And then all the expectations around who you are, when you should speak, when you shouldn't. You know, little girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, right? And that already tells you how you're supposed to be in the world. You know, children should be seen, not heard, these kinds of ideas. And then as you get older, you're socialized, especially now by social media, which has an enormous influence in young people's lives.
Yeah.
And the comparisоnism, right? The comparison, you know, everybody wants to be the most beautiful. And, you know, they forget that things that are posted on social media are not necessarily the truth. It's curated material, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it creates a world of kind of people who operate on automatic pilot without realizing that they have all these programs in the background. So it's culture, it's family, it's religion, it's media, it's education. All of those different components combine to create a particular type of living. This is how you fit into society. And if you're kind of outside, people start to look at you funny, or you're viewed strangely. This is why we have so much censorship now, right? Because whenever people step outside of that, they begin to be censored.
Yeah.
Which to me is a dangerous trend in a free society.
Definitely. Was that nerve-wracking for you to kind of step into kind of that new age thing, or were you raised like that?
Not at all. I was raised in a very stifling religion. Actually, no. Let me rephrase that. Until the age of 10, I was raised in a very non-religious, atheist, agnostic environment.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So my parents had a huge library, which I devoured before the age of 10, on all sorts of different subjects, including spirituality, including yoga, including transcendental meditation, all sorts of interesting, fascinating things.
Okay.
And then at the age of 10, they were discovered by missionaries from Jehovah's Witnesses, and they ended up converting. And so for the next 10 years or so, I lived in that environment, which I found extremely stifling and just it didn't agree with me.
Yeah.
So when I was around
So then
20,
you're 20.
right. So
Okay.
then at that point, my parents got a job overseas. My dad got a job overseas and went away to the Middle East. And I convinced him to take my mom with him. And I started university. And when I started university, my mind just blew up. It just expanded because I studied psychology and philosophy and English literature and mythology and everything that I absolutely loved. And it was at that point that I realized I had to leave this religion because my mind would not be contained by such, small ideas. So I left at the age of 21. I wrote a letter and disassociated myself because I didn't want to be harassed. And it was hard to tell my parents. It was very difficult to tell my parents because I knew my mother would take it personally. I was, going against her values, etc.
Yeah.
I knew I had to do what I had to do. So ever since then, I've kind of followed my own path. And that's just how it's been. And I've realized I'm not like most people. And I came to terms with that, and it's okay.
Definitely, definitely. Through your journey and all of the challenges that you've gone through in your life, have you discovered any sort of like a process that you go through yourself that you can share with us as far as, coming to a challenge and then climbing up that hurdle and overcoming it? Do you have any advice that you could give us as far as some steps that you take when you come face to face with something that's not ideal?
So everyone's journey is really different, and everybody is at a very different point in their lives.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this depends on your personal evolution and where you are at what stage of the game you're at. So for me, to awaken, I had to be basically going through a crisis. The most important thing in my life was my marriage. It wasn't me, it was my marriage. And when that kind of dissolved around me, it just threw me right to the bottom, like right in the deepest hole. So I had to figure out emotionally.
Okay.
I had to figure out how am I going to get out of this? And what did I do wrong? What happened here to bring me to this place? So I did a number of different things. First of all, I went to therapy because I was drowning in sorrow and sadness and grief. And then I began to read everything I could find my hands on codependence, on why marriages broke up, on relationships, on communications, on all of these things. So for me, that was how I started the journey. I also went to a course that was helping people who were going through breakups. So we were in a group environment, so we were all going through the same thing. So there was a lot of community support in that.
Beautiful.
So I attacked it from many different angles because what was happening to me was so unacceptable to me that I wanted to make sure it never happened again, and that I learned everything I could out of it. And one of the most important things that I learned was that I was not a victim of a marriage breaking down. I had a lot to do with it breaking down. It wasn't just happening to me. I wasn't a victim, but I had contributed to it.
Yes.
And that was very hard to swallow, very hard to come to terms with. But it was also very freeing because it allowed me to see that I had power to change this so that it would not happen again. And this is where self-awareness comes in. I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of crying. And I did a lot of talking with, with a therapist. I did energy work. And throughout the years, I've done lots of different modalities, depending on what was happening in my life, because that was the first challenge, but there were many, many others throughout my life. So I would say becoming aware of yourself and what is happening inside of you and your thoughts and behavior patterns that are not helpful to you is the first step. And then getting help with that. And there's nothing wrong with getting help. You can be, being empowered and being strong doesn't mean you know everything or you can do everything on your own. Empowered people and confident people seek help when needed, because none of us is an island, right? We're all interdependent on each other. And knowing where your limitations are and working with those in an intelligent and self-aware way is hugely important to be able to grow as a person, right? Yeah. And there's layers and there's steps and there's different things that you do at different times in your life. But that's what, if there's a challenge, start to pull out of the situation and try to see what is really happening as if maybe it was a movie. Maybe if it's happening to someone else, watch yourself as if you're watching a movie and see if you can pull yourself out of the emotional turmoil, because that's when it's hardest for us to really make sense, when we're in deep emotional turmoil.
I love the fact that you're talking about the movie thing. I remember when I was in my past abusive relationship and I was unsure, I remember I always used to think to myself, is this normal? Like, is what he's doing or saying or acting, is this normal? Is this what other people are going through? And I remember there was a certain point or time period where I would pull, like exactly what you said, I would pull myself out and actually view it as a movie and think to myself, if I saw this, if I was just watching this, somebody else's life or in a movie, is this appropriate behavior or not? That's like a great way to really like step back and analyze what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Do we want to read this from this Facebook user?
Sure.
You want to read it out loud?
So we have someone commenting, early therapy, wise, so many ignore therapy. Exactly. But the record shows that therapy can help. Yes, journaling, again, most benefit from journaling. Absolutely. Yeah, behavior patterns. Look at yourself. Great contribution, Ileana. Thanks. You're welcome. This is what we teach in our women's courses, which I know we're going to discuss a little bit later, but becoming aware of what is operating inside of you, because until you're aware, it's a pattern and a background program that you have no control over.
Exactly. Just so that you know, whoever just messaged that one or two, in the description there, StreamYard gives permission for your name to be shown. So if you want your name to be shown, you just have to go into the description of where we are, and StreamYard has a little link. You press the link and give them permission. I want to ask you, what do you think happened to you where you, at such a early age in your 20s, gave you the ability to be able to think differently? Do you think something happened to you when you were younger where you felt at a point where you could think differently and that's how it kind of happened? Or did somebody tell you? How do you think you got to that point? Because what I find a lot of times is some people get it, like you, and then other people sit in the problem and they enjoy the problem. What's the difference, do you think, between those two types of people?
I think there's a couple of things. You want to hear the metaphysical explanation?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay. So I believe that we incarnate in our lives with a particular plan and with a particular soul maturity. So there are souls that have lived through many different lives and have attained a certain level of maturity, and they come here with a specific purpose that they need to fulfill that affects a lot of other people. And this is not something that ever goes away despite any other kind of conditioning that happens, because it's always percolating in the back of their minds and their psyche. So for me, I was always interested in things that were not mainstream. I loved science fiction, fantasy. I could explore possibilities. I believed in other realms. And I just knew that this life and this 3D reality we live in is not everything there is. This was like a deep, innate knowledge that I didn't really learn from any books. It was just something I was born with and I carried with me throughout. And even with the Jehovah's Witness conditioning, that was only very surface for me. I never really fully bought into it. No.
Yeah.
So when I left, it didn't mean anything to me anymore. It didn't affect me anymore. I never thought about it. I always had friends outside. I picked my own friends. I picked my own books that I read. I made my own choices. So I think that's, to me, is the most significant thing. And also because I have always wanted to learn more and I have always reached for something else. It has always been hugely important to me to see more possibilities than just what we have, what we're told. And because those stories have never been enough for me.
Yeah.
So that's what I think it is. Also, my early upbringing, as I told you, I was in a very kind of relaxed, liberal environment with my parents at the time. They had the Iliad and the Odyssey and mythology and psychology books, and I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. So my mind was already fed with these ideas. And then, the whole religion thing came in, and I remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. It's just not right. It's just too small, right? And so in my early 20s, when my parents were away, is when I made my decision, because I knew that being authentic and living according to my own inner drive and what I needed to do was the most important thing in my own life. You cannot live for other people, especially something like belonging to a religion and what your beliefs are. They're your beliefs or they're for someone else. And that to me, it was just not an option. And that's why I had the strength to leave.
That totally makes sense. 100%. How does one get to that point though? Like if they're 32 years old and don't have any of that in their backing. Like I remember in my early 30s having the epiphany of being able to make a choice. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like it hit me so hard that I have a choice. So how does somebody get to that point when they've been living a certain way their whole life and then they're hitting a wall of like something's not right?
So it's just not enough anymore. The way I'm living is just not satisfying something within my soul. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say to begin doing some reading and watching some YouTube videos about some non-mainstream stuff. So maybe do some research into metaphysics, into some new age ideas. And, everyone, again, will be on a different path. I mean, I can recommend some books.
What's a book you would recommend? Like just like a nugget of information. Nothing where you're diving into the deep.
I don't know books with one nugget, but I can tell you one of the most important books I ever read was called Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, and that talks about the soul on a spirit level and how it comes into this life and what happens here and why we incarnate where we do and how we choose everything and how we have our soul contracts. So for me, that's what pulled me out of what was happening with me. And I thought, oh, well, there's a greater purpose here. Now I'm starting to understand why things are happening the way they are and that I'm not being manipulated like a chess piece. Because this was a huge thing for me, that things were happening to me and I couldn't understand why. So I began to understand that I came to learn certain lessons and accomplish certain things. And now I know that if I had not been through all of the things that I've been through, all the difficulties and challenges, I wouldn't be able to speak from a place of authority and having been there and understanding what those are and helping others throughout their own thing, right?
Yeah.
Because when you speak from experience, it's a very different thing than when you speak from books or from when you speak from head knowledge. I've been through all these things. I've suffered depression. I've been suicidal. I know what it's like to be like really in that very dark place. And I've been able to come out and create something very different for my life because my whole perception about who I am and what I'm doing here has shifted enormously.
Yeah, definitely. The reason I say a little nugget is my own story. My dad when he was like, he's told this story a few times, and I'm going to totally butcher it. So, Dad, if you're listening, he tells, because we were raised as Jehovah's Witnesses. So this is like a story he would tell us in order to keep us in line for being a Jehovah's Witness. And my parents are still witnesses, by the way. So he tells this story of before he became a Jehovah's Witness. He was in his 20s or something, late 20s. He went to the library and he rented, whatever that is. What is it called when you don't rent? You like loan, borrow. A book from a few books on New Age stuff, like woo-woo stuff is what we call it now. And maybe even some witchcraft. I don't remember. But something that was not, it was exactly what you said, like non-religion, spirituality kind of stuff. And he said he got into his car, had the books in the passenger seat. He's driving. My dad is super knowledgeable. One of the things that I love about my dad, he can absorb stuff. He's like a forever learner. Unfortunately, he's just learning the same stuff. Kind of like what you said, they live in a very small world. So my dad got stuck there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, for all of us, it just stopped there. So he tried, though. So he has these books, and something happened while he was driving. Like, I don't know if he like felt a cold hand on his arm, or if like the car wheel turned. Something super spooky happened while he was driving that led him to believe that the demons were coming for him. Now, he was raised as a Catholic, so he was not a Jehovah's Witness yet, but he was like really religious Catholic. Not really, but like he was a Catholic. So he turned the car around, went back to the library, and gave the books back.
Right.
Because he was certain that he had invited the devil into his life. And this is the story that he told us growing up to like keep us like, don't ever look
in
at
fear.
anything else. Yes.
In fear. Yeah.
Yes.
That's very
so
unfortunate.
Interesting. What do you make of that? Coincidence?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a subconscious thing because especially in these very powerful religions, you have people who really indoctrinate very strongly, and there's very specific ways to behave and specific things that will happen if you don't behave in that way. And so the fear is so deep and it runs so deep, the programming, that yes, these things can definitely manifest in something like that to really just scare you from ever touching anything outside of that prescribed way of living, which is, unfortunate.
Yeah. But even to this day, I just wonder like how much of that, now that I know what I know, how much of that was just his internal body just doing something.
Yeah, because he was like, there's a part that was obviously resisting and terrified about what he was doing, right? Like, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing this. So we can scare ourselves, and sometimes people scare themselves to death. I'm sure you've heard of these situations, right?
Yeah.
We have very powerful minds. So yeah, it's very unfortunate. Of course, now this stuff has become much more mainstream too. I'm sure when he did this, it would have been what, the 1970s?
Yeah,
or something like that?
He's like probably 68, 65, somewhere around there. Yeah.
And at the time it was completely unknown and very woo-woo, and stay away from that. Now, of course, it's so much more mainstream and there's so much more information out there. So there's a lot in those realms, and I don't agree with everything that's out there, but I always tell, I have my Facebook group of over 600 ladies, and we talk about these things, and I always tell them to trust their inner guidance. Yeah. If it resonates with you, it resonates with you. And if it doesn't, just let it go. It's okay. Not everything is for everybody. That's a really important thing to know.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Just because like we're discussing something on here doesn't mean that this is the way for everybody.
Exactly.
This
is my experience.
It's being open to, we don't know what we don't know. So
Exactly.
how are we supposed to know that there's any other way of thinking unless we invite someone like you onto the platform to speak about it so that we can get a little bit of feel for it and then and be like, oh my gosh, wow, and move towards, or not so much, but at least
That's
now we
right.
know,
Yes.
but there's no way of knowing unless,
Exploring is always interesting, but you have to have that curiosity and that openness.
the curiosity is key.
Yeah, and not be living in fear of everything that you don't know. Just because you don't know something, you're not familiar with it, it doesn't mean it's necessarily frightening.
Yeah, definitely. What's the number one lesson you've learned out of your life?
Yeah, so that I need to trust in my inner guidance, and that sometimes I make decisions that don't appear logical and rational because I operate from a very different place. And so lots of synchronicities happen in my life that kind of guide me in a particular way. And learning to listen to that for me has been very important, as opposed to always operating from my ego, which is very hard driving and very strong. I have a very strong and powerful ego. So I've had to work with it and kind of put it a little bit aside so that I can allow that inner guidance to come through.
Do you
Because
think we all have
sometimes,
a strong ego?
well, I think some of us have stronger ego than others, especially those of us who are driven, who have things that they want to accomplish, who are very action oriented, who are like you. You know, it's that driving force. So the ego is essential to our life here, and it helps us accomplish things on this 3D existence level. But it shouldn't be in the driver's seat. So the ego is actually, if you read Carl Jung, who is like my favorite psychologist, he talks about the ego being the master, which is the mistake that we make, because the ego should be the servant of the soul, because the soul is the one that has the purpose and the strength and the knowledge and the connection with divinity at all times. And if we operate from that place with the ego helping us, then we create a very different paradigm in our lives. So that's how I try to operate.
Oh, I love that. Okay, wait. So the ego should be the servant of the
The
soul.
soul, yeah. The soul is that divine, spiritual, energetic part of us that's always connected to source divine. And it always has that link. So we have to be open enough to listen to its guidance as opposed to always being in the grip of the ego. So the ego is always pushing, it wants this, it pushes for this. It's always comparing, it's always criticizing, it's always judging. And it's making our lives actually very difficult. But if you
Wow.
allow spirit to guide a little bit, and if you listen to the synchronicities and you allow those things to flow in your life, you find that things happen differently. That's just been my experience, of course.
Yes. Now, what is a different word besides servant? Do we have to use the word servant? I don't appreciate that word very much.
Assistant,
Assistant or assist.
yeah. So if
Okay.
the ego is in a role not of guiding, this is the thing, not leading, but assisting, right? And
Okay.
as we all know from the corporate world, the assistant is extremely important to the leader. They can't
Yeah.
really operate without the assistant. It's a symbiosis.
Yeah.
But it should be very clear that it's the soul that's doing the guiding and not the ego.
Could soul also be like heart centered?
Yes. So
Your soul.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And that's where you listen to your inner guidance. It comes through your heart. And of course, your heart is about love, right? So approaching the world from that place as opposed to approaching it from the ego place, which is always like, who's going to hurt me? Who's going to upset me? And has very thin skin, right? Is always taking offense, is always like on the lookout for things. That is actually a very stifling way to live and very minimalizing way to live,
Very interesting. I'm
at least
almost
in my opinion.
picturing I'm almost picturing like the ego being like to say an illustration that's coming to mind from what you're saying is ideal. I'm almost picturing the ego being like a shadow.
So our shadows do live in the ego, and that's why inner work is so important, because you
Wait,
do
what?
shadow work. So don't forget the ego is a mental construct. It doesn't have physical existence that you can go, oh, there it is. It's part of who we are, but it is a part that's very stuck in our shadows and in our issues and in our unresolved traumas.
Oh
So
my
learning
gosh.
to work with that, and the inner child work is also really important. So the mothering we didn't get when we were children. We often didn't get proper mothering and nurturing because our own mothers had their own issues and their own traumas that were not resolved. So they gave what they had to give and what they could. But inner child work means that we learn how to reparent ourselves in a much more loving and appropriate and compassionate, self-compassionate way. Because one of the things that happens is we're not self-compassionate. We're constantly beating up on ourselves, especially as women, when we don't live up to what we think we should be. And again, this is what we teach in our women's course, that this is a very disempowering way to live. Beating yourself up, self-criticizing, putting yourself down, that's just not love. And the soul comes from love, from your heart. It's a very different paradigm in how you view things in your life.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with all that. That is so interesting. I am very sitting in my ego right now for putting shadow and ego together. Just low key having a little celebration right now. So listen, we have 72 people hanging out with us right now live. I want to thank everyone who is chilling with us and listening to this awesome story and guidance and some little nuggets of information that you're feeding us right now. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what you do, your business, your website, where people can follow you if they're resonating with what you are saying. Where can we find you? What do you do?
So on my website, I have a blog section, and I actually write about a lot of these things that we're talking about. I have a blog post on who are you listening to, your ego or spirit, and this is the conversation you and I were having. But what I'm most excited about right now is that my business partner and I have created these unique and transformational courses for women. So we help them actually through all of these things that we were talking about. They're presented at the corporate level. Right now, we're working with businesses because we've noticed that a lot of women in the workforce are feeling very unsure about themselves. They don't know how to set boundaries. They're not communicating in an empowered way, and they need some guidance as to make that happen. So this is what we're doing at this moment. We're working with European and North American or progressive organizations who see the need for that. And I'm so super excited to tell you that ever since we started to do this, the response has been tremendous. And we're noticing this for women at the millennial age and also older. So it seems to really span the gamut because of the conditioning, the programming you and I were talking about. So many of us have been conditioned that we're not good enough, that we should be quiet, that we need to always be giving to others and not taking care of ourselves because that's selfish. And instead of following our own path and our own intuition and authenticity, we do what others expect us to do, and we feel bad and guilty and terrible if we do what our soul wants us to do. So we're working with women to help them develop the self-confidence and really starting to live in a very empowered kind of way. So that's what I'm really super excited about at the moment, because we're waking them up. This is about wakening up to what you can become.
Yeah, definitely. So is all of that on your website? How do people find you?
Yes, so that's my website, and I have a page, phoenixontherise.com/EWN, and that's where the description of my courses
in the
are.
description. Yeah. The website she just gave is in the description. So you can either go here to her website, or in the description. What's in the description? It's
it should be a link to the page I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah. Beautiful. I love that. And then if they want to follow you on social media, is all of that on there?
Yeah, and I also have, as I said, a women's group on Facebook, which you belong to. So it's over 600 women, and it's called Women's Spirituality, Wisdom, and Empowerment Hub. And we talk a lot about these non-religious spiritual beliefs and practices. And we also talk about women's empowerment and how we can work with these ideas to make our lives better and to really change the world, because the Dalai Lama said that the world will be saved by the Western woman. So I don't know exactly what he meant, but I'd like to begin to see that happen.
Absolutely, definitely. What's your take on success? What does success mean to you?
So because I'm a very unusual person,
I love it.
success means that I get to travel the world and to impact positively, affect positively as many people as possible. That's what really makes me happy. And I know that when I do that, everything flows out of that. Fulfillment, contentment, financial security, everything comes out of doing that kind of work. And the travel piece is huge for me because I have a nomadic soul. So I just love to move around and try different things and live in different places. And this is why my network is so large, because I've lived in lots of different places. I make friends easily. And so, I kind of collect people wherever I go.
Yes.
Which is so much fun. And so that's what spells success for me. So it's not so much about the outer things that, you amass. It's more about having the freedom to travel and also to be able to do this kind of thing, to talk about these beautiful things, to see people awaken to their true self and become empowered and live from a very different perspective. That's, to me, is success.
That's awesome. What would you say to somebody who is struggling right now with connecting with their authentic self?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, and it's got again to do with the programming, right? Because when you're in the grip of the programming, you don't even know who you are. You're just operating on automatic pilot.
Yeah.
So I would say again, starting to become aware of what it is that you're doing and how you're reacting, and definitely the journaling part is really important. So normally people who are not sure what their authentic self is feel this void. They feel emptiness inside. They feel like something's missing, even if they might be, outwardly very successful and they might have money and prestige and cars and houses and whatever else are the images of that. There's something inside that's missing. So if that is the case, then I would certainly begin with the journaling piece and start to look around at how other people live, other people who don't live conventional lives. We're so programmed to live conventional lives, to follow everybody, to live in a certain way. But there are lots of people who don't live in that way. And sometimes they have a door that opens. Read something that maybe challenges you and that you find just super interesting, but is not mainstream. Start to explore different things. There's Gaia.com. Gaia.com has all of these non-spiritual videos that you, non-religious spiritual videos you can watch on every kind of subject that we have discussed.
How do you spell that, Gaia?
GAIA.com.
Beautiful.
So they talk about everything in there that is non-mainstream. So that's the alternate to Netflix. It's a spiritual Netflix.
I love it. Wow, I've never even heard of that. I feel like I've seen that name before. Is that like
I'm sure you have. They advertise on Facebook.
Really? That's where I've seen it?
Probably. Yeah, they do advertise quite a bit.
No kidding.
But it's super interesting. It's super interesting. So I think they offer a week for free. You can check it out.
No kidding.
Just to open up, to something else, to some other possibilities.
Yes.
Because you don't know until you start to explore. And it's a process. It's not like tomorrow you're going to go, oh, well, now I know what to do. Allow yourself that. And perhaps, allow yourself to explore a different kind of modality like hypnotherapy, past life regression. There are lots of things that are available right now in the world that were not before, and they are very well known. Yeah. Lots of people have done them. So there's nothing really frightening about it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been fantastic.
Yes, it's been lots of fun.
I so appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us and sharing so much awesome information. I feel like I could just keep digging
Yeah.
into, into some of that. This has been great. For those of you that are watching live, we so appreciate you being here and hanging out with us. If you're watching on the replay and you made it this far, make sure you hashtag replay so that we can say hello to you and we know where you are, what platform you're watching us on, and we can show you some love. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
So I would say that, especially for women, to find out your power, dig deep, do whatever research you need to do, get a coach, do some therapy, whatever you need to do, and to be your authentic self, to live from a place that makes you happy. Your light is needed in the world. Your talents or gifts are necessary, and they add to the diversity and the beauty of the world that we live in, and they're essential. Like the way you've done it. I mean, you are like a shining example of that, Sabrina, the way you have come from your own struggles, and what you're doing right now is just so amazing. I've told you, I'm in total awe of you. So you're like the example that it can be done, and it's never too late. It's absolutely never too late to start on the journey. That would be my advice, to live from that place. And the only way to live from a place of empowerment is really find out how to fill that void that you may have.
Exactly. Great advice. I love it. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. This has been fantastic. I certainly hope that we can have you on again in the future.
For sure.
I am going to go ahead and close out. Thank you so much for all of you that were joining us here at the Her Version podcast. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And as always, follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at heraversion.life. I am Sabrina Victoria. I am the host of this awesome podcast. And I love it because I am able to allow people to share their truth and inspire others. As